各位委員大家好。
Good afternoon, members. We have formed a quorum. First item, election of chairman and deputy chairman. This is our usual practice, that is, we elect a chairman and a deputy chairman for every new session. Yes? Any nomination? Mr. Stephen Ho, I would like you to continue to be our chair. Do we need to elect a new chairman? In other words, members, what do you think? No need? Let's keep the status quo. No need to elect a new one. All right. Please invite the officials to join us.
好，我哋今日咧就主要咧就係有3個議程㗎嚇。
We have 3 items on the agenda today. The next one is implementation of public health, animals and birds trading and breeding regulations Cat 139B. And we have another one on in relation to public health grounds and the way forward for this subcommittee.
好，咁我哋歡迎呢就食物及衛生局副局長徐德義醫生啦。
I'd like to welcome Dr. Chui Tak-yi, Undersecretary for Food and Health, Mr. Bill Wong, Principal Assistant Secretary, and from the AFCD, Dr. Thomas Sid. Welcome. We have also got Dr. Mary Chow and Dr. Esther To.
好，咁呢我哋或者係請副局長係咪介紹下
Undersecretary, can you please introduce the paper? Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is about the enhanced regulatory regime on dog breeding and selling. It's Cat 139B. It commenced operation on the 20th of March this year, so it's more than 6 months. So this paper is a progress report. The details can be found in the paper, and I don't think I should repeat all those points. We welcome the comments and questions from members. Thank you.
係咁呢就我哋而家首先就係第一輪啦，我哋請毛孟靜。
First round, Ms. Claudia Mo, 5 minutes for each member. It said that you have conducted 2,400 inspections. Did you call them in advance? Or did you write to them in advance? They're saying that I'm going to inspect. Or is it are they surprise checks? Or did you do both? So that's the first question. Question number 2, there were 3 cases, according to you, where the one-off breeding permit was not applied for and the prosecution action was taken, and then there were another 13 pending cases. What were these 13 pending cases about? What really happened? Surprise checks? And prosecution. I will defer to Dr. To. Dr. Esther To. In respect of the first question on inspections, we cover both regular inspections and surprise checks. In some cases, we had to make an appointment through telephone first, but very often our colleagues would just call on the relevant places without telling them. Well, if you tell them that I'm coming, they will of course sort everything out and make sure that everything is tidy. What can you find then? Can you tell us more about the number? of inspections, 2,400. How many of them are scheduled or regular inspections? I don't have the breakdown figures, but most of those were surprise checks. So you mean more than 1,200 were surprise checks? What about locations? Both on Hong Kong Island, Kowloon and Anti. We will cover the licensed animal sellers and breeders, or places where we suspect selling activities took place. Most of them were the licensed operators, licensed sellers. What about the 13 pending cases? I'll defer to Dr. Chow. Dr. Chow? If we receive information from the internet or from the public that certain dogs selling activities were conducted, we carry out inspections. As the member has rightly pointed out, there have been 3 prosecutions. The other 13 were suspected cases of illegal selling, or whether there are cases of unlicensed breeding or unlicensed selling. We have to look at the facts to see which legal provisions can be invoked. So you acted on information received from the public or from the internet. Is that all you have been doing? Do you also have informers? So there were 13 cases and another 3 prosecutions arising from information you gathered from the internet. So the number is low. If I know something from the internet, shouldn't you be able to do some detective work over the internet? Did you rely only on complaints or the internet? Well, actually, I haven't made myself clear. We have a task force serving the websites for information, and we act on those cases. In addition, we would also receive complaints from the public. So altogether, there were 90 cases. Of the 90 cases, how many were detected through your own work, and how many were reported to you by the public? And of the 16 cases, these cases are subsumed under the 90 cases, right? What happened to the rest of the 90? Are they being investigated, Dr. Chow? Most of the cases were detected through our work in checking the internet websites. What about complaints made over phone? Some of the cases were were the result of telephone information or emails. I don't have the breakdown figures with me.
我都係想跟進頭先毛孟靜議員嘅問題啫，因為
Mr. Jeremy Tam, well, according to your paper, paragraph 9, as at the 30th of September 2017, a total of 90 complaints have been received about offers to sell a dog without a license, or OOP, on the internet. So you talk about receiving 90 complaints. Is that really the case? Or maybe you should make it, you could clarify the matter. Well, not just for the future. Maybe after the meeting, please tell us how many of the 90 complaints were detected through your efforts, how many were the complaints either through the internet or through telephone hotline. So you want breakdown figures, 3 breakdown figures: internet complaint, telephone complaint, and internet monitoring efforts. All right.
Okay, my next question is, okay, if you've been browsing the web, well, there is actually a chat group called online trading area, or that's pets trading area. All right, there are all sorts of pets being traded, and actually there are pigs, and of course the highlights would be cats and dogs. So I'd like to know, when you say that you conduct spot checks, but then how surprised is that? Because you're talking about 6 months, and 90 cases in 6 months. In other words, there's about a dozen or so in a month, and yet most of them were actually reported cases. So with regard to online patrols, what kind of patrols are your team doing? And also, as to how many people have been involved in the online patrol, so how much time would they be spending every day in doing the online inspection or patrol? Well, we have 7 people or 7 colleagues in the task force. So you refer to a task force. So what about the trading area? The online pets trading zone? Well, we did conduct checks on websites frequently used by animal traders, and there are sites where the same individual would be posting several times. So as a result, the number of prosecutions might be somewhat different from the number of inspections. It doesn't really matter, because you're actually prosecuting him for selling one pet animal. So if he's involved in trading one animal, then you'll be prosecuting him once. And even if he's trading 100 animals, you won't be prosecuting him 100 times, right? You also have some decoy operations. So for the 7 staff members on your team, so they've only been able to complete some 90 cases, because earlier on you also said that every month you would be conducting some 400 regular inspections on those licensees. So for the 7 colleagues, do they also have to do those instead, or rather they just be doing decoy operations? And also, when new licenses are issued according to Para 7, you're talking about 400 regular inspections every month. So who would be responsible for what? Well, for online patrols, the 7 colleagues that I was referring to would be responsible for that. So there is a detailed breakdown in terms of their duties. Okay, so 7 members on the team, and you've only been able to identify 7 cases a month. So I can only say that I really admire your efforts. I really have to commend them for their hard work. So I'd like to move a motion to commend their efforts later. Well, I might not have made myself entirely clear. Well, in terms of online activities, there might have been different posts or advertisements online, but then for the more suspicious ones, or warranting action, so we will have to deal with them. And for the pursuable cases, in fact, the number would not be very large, and therefore, well, every month we screen about 200 plus advertisements, and we would only go after those pursuable cases. Yes, Mr. Kwong Chun Kit. All right, 7 members are forming a team, and then in 6 months, if you look at the figures, there are only 90 cases, and we try to count our fingers. Okay, so 7 people with 7 PCs, and then once every 2 or 3 days, they might have been able to dig out 1 or 2 suspicious cases. So, well, I'd like to get another figure. That is in the past, because of the timeline. So has there been any case that you have not been able to confirm the case? For example, there might be a pursuable case, and then you try to track that down, and then afterwards you notice that the dog has been sold, and yet nothing has been done about it. So for online trading, it's something that can be done very expeditiously. And just now, according to the administration, you described it as a judgment has to be made. All right, there might be different advertisements. This might be pursuable, the other one might not be pursuable. So what are the criteria? So for the non-pursuable cases, well, could that be that they are actually the most pursuable cases? So would that be decided solely by the 7-man team? So do you have guidelines for them? First, let me clarify. Well, for the decoy operation, it's very labor intensive. It takes a lot of time, so it's not as simple as that. So you cannot just rely on one single individual doing the whole thing, because somebody would have to be the informant. Somebody has to do the communication guy, and then they would have to act as if they were a couple and so on. So it takes a long time, and then there needs to be some correspondence online, and they would also have to make an appointment to see the dog before they can be sure. So you might say that well, just a dozen or so cases a month might not look really large in terms of workload. Actually, it's very labor intensive. Can you repeat the question, Mr. Kwong? Okay, so for the 7-member team, do you think that is large enough to cope with the workload? Because you're talking about many cases or many activities happening online. Because they will have to make a phone call to make inquiries. They will also have to be completely involved, for example, seeking legal advice or contacting the police and so on and so forth. So they have to be a jack of all trades, and they will have to do everything. So, Chairman, can I follow up? Can I supplement? Well, there is a latest case, because if you talk about online trading, indeed, many people are very careful these days. So it's not just about browsing the post online, and then I can immediately take out prosecution, because there might be platforms that you will have to log on. So you will have to join the platform, and you will have to infiltrate them, and that takes a long time. And as Madam Chow just said, the arrangement is that you will have to gain their trust before you can take action. So the 7-member team has been doing that, and on some occasions they would also have to seek legal advice. So it's like the TV drama, so that they would act as undercover agents, and they will have to gain the trust and so on. But then for the 90 cases, well, you're giving people the impression that, okay, the severity of the problem is not very serious. All right, they might have been working very hard in substantiating a case. So given the situation, the question that we'd like to ask, well, is it that the number 90 has not been able to fully reflect the situation that we are facing in terms of animal trading, and also the problems encountered by pet animals and so on? So is it that you're telling us that despite the hard work of the 7-member team, well, from the time you start to track down on a case to the time when you have been able to take action, it would take a long time? And even if you can see the dog, that you can make arrests and so on, well, from what I've heard, yes, they've been working very hard, and yet they have not been able to show the bigger picture. So can you tell us exactly what you've been doing? So at least on the issue of the 90 cases, that's because you've only started the work not too long ago. So can you tell us a bit more as to what exactly have you been doing, and what's your view about the 90 cases? So have they been able to fully reflect the the situation on the ground? Yes. Dr. Sid, I'll try to help out with my colleagues, because during the past 20 years in terms of animal trading and so on, well, this time we've been able to come up with this new piece of legislation, and to me, I think this is a very stringent piece of legislation, because in very few overseas jurisdictions that they have such a stringent legislation to regulate animal trading. And we've also talked to the traders, and they're of the view that to resort to such stringent regulation to regulate the trade In fact, there have been fewer and fewer illegal traders. We can't say that we have completely eradicated this kind of trading, but then the fact that we've managed to take out more than a dozen prosecutions, and on several cases, the defendants have been found guilty and fined by the court. I think that we have achieved a pretty good deterrent effect, and also with the new law being publicized, members of the public are fully aware of the fact that if you buy a pet animal, if you buy a cat or a dog, you will have to go to the licensed trader instead of patronizing the unlicensed traders online. Because number one, you have to be sure that your dog is healthy, and if there are any problems, you can always go back to the trader to get after sale service. Yes, Mr. Raymond Chen. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to clarify the figures first. Paragraph 5 of the paper has a table, okay, for the approved applications, okay, for DBLA is 6 and DBLB 6. So the figure has been very low. So I couldn't help but think that there might not be many traders who can sell or trade in dogs or cats. So how many would be approved? So for the Cat B traders, so what's the range? So for those who have been licensed in breeding and selling dogs, so together, how many dogs are we talking about for both categories, DBLA and DBLB? Or are you saying that is still on the low side? That's because some of them might not have applied for the license because they are not aware of the latest situation. So that brings me to the next question. That is, do you have to step up publicity and also your crackdown on unauthorized sellers? And also for those who have been licensed, for example, for DBLAs, would you be inspecting their license? For example, they might have claimed that they are only breeding a certain number, but then they might be breeding a lot more. And also for those who are Cat A licensees, for the premises that they used to keep these animals, are there any domestic premises? Because we've been talking about deed of covenant, whether or not they would permit the breeding of dogs in private premises and so on. You said that you would be considering the premises. You would also be checking the deed of covenant before you decide whether or not a license should be issued. So I think he'd like to know the distinction between DBLA and DBLB. Yes? Well, coming back to your first question on the 6 months license, well, according to the information that we have, for those who have been registered, so for the 6 cases, a total of 121 dogs are involved, and then for the largest number, we are talking about 42 in total. So what's the range? So more than 4, and maximum is now standing at 42. And then on inspections, well, to follow up on this one first, have you done any estimate? Is it normal, or is it on the low side? Well, it's normal, because he will have to apply for a DBLB, and he will also have to meet many requirements, and our requirements have become more stringent, and therefore he will have to fulfill the requirements. For example, for the premises for keeping animals and so on, they will have to meet our requirement before we would issue the license. But then before the commencement of the legislation, you might not have been fully aware of the situation, but then you should have an idea as to how many such premises there are out there. So is it that after the introduction of the legislation, some of these premises have been closed down? All right, we have already had the 14-month legislation before the new regulation comes into force. So there are some that are being processed. And we have also noticed that, for pet shops that are selling animals, they are now beginning to sell fewer dogs, and some have completely given up on that. So we can see that in the market there has been some adjustments going on. And on the second point, that is about the number of inspections. Well, we're referring to the 14 existing cases or existing licenses. We would conduct regular monthly inspection. What about Cat A licenses, are any of those premises private domestic premises? Well, for Cat A licensees, we're talking about registered female dogs ranging from 1 to 3. And for raw deregistered premises, we have inspected those premises, and there are also private premises, of course, because we expect that to be a domestic setting, keeping their own pet animals, so they would be taking care of their own pet animals. So all of them are private domestic premises.
We did ask whether you are going to examine the deed of mutual covenant in assessing the license applications, because we don't want to revoke the license if there are complaints from neighbors. So are you going to issue the license notwithstanding the DMC prohibition? Although DMC is not part of the CAP 138B, but if the DMC hinders the compliance of the licensing conditions and requirements, we would take that into consideration in the processing. I want to follow up a point made by Mr. Ray Chan. There are 40 animal trader licenses under which selling of dogs will be allowed. Do you know the source of the dogs for these traders? Are they from premises holding DBLB? Or they may have imported dogs from other countries, or sourced dogs from breeding operators holding DBLB. Regular inspections would cover this aspect in the checks. Concerning internet trading, it said that even porcupine is sold, offered for sale. Is it legal to buy and sell porcupines in Hong Kong? It's under another law, CAP 586. They are protected, and no selling or buying is allowed. Dr. Sid, there are a number of laws protecting some of the animal species, especially endangered species. So if it's highly endangered, no selling or buying is allowed. But even if it's just listed, then a permit is required. And there are laws prohibiting the catching of some wild animals for sale in Hong Kong. For dogs and cats, and trading and breeding of dogs and cats, they are covered under CAP 139. Well, if there is evidence to prove that someone is trying to sell porcupines, it's against the law. So you have laws to protect endangered species. Well, it's the work of the Environment Bureau, and then the enforcement agency is the Customs and Excise Department, and AFCD is responsible for some other things. So you need to look into the policy, the division of policy responsibilities. So I don't know whether CAP 139B would touch on this, because it may have to do with cruelty to animals. So you may want to consider introducing an omnibus law on prevention of cruelty. Maybe the FSEH panel should continue to monitor the matter, since it may not come squarely within our portfolio in the subcommittee's portfolio. All right. Second round, Ms. Quadimo. I want to seek the views of the Undersecretary in relation to the discussion we've just had. You are now trying to introduce or new concepts for animal carers. It gives people that this is just for window dressing. And you have colleagues who are vets here with you. So Mr. Roy Kong wants to introduce a law on animal protection. You may say that, well, it's a mammoth task. It may take more than 10 years to complete. So what's your inclination? What do you want to achieve as we move forward instead of just relying on Cat 139B? Seeing that you need to get a license for breeding and selling and trading. I want Dr. Choi to say something to that. Dr. Choi.
秘書長答。
多謝主席。我諗正話喺嗰個之前嗰個討論嗰個。
Mr. Wong, when we came to brief members on the policy address, the Secretary already addressed this point, and maybe I can repeat some of the points made. We are concerned whether the law on protection of animals can achieve the intended objectives. Some laws, when enacted, was for the purpose of control of, say, rabies. We're going to review these animal-related laws. If the objective of animal protection can still be achieved, and if the law is not outdated or out of line with international trend, then we just don't see a point in introducing amendments. There was a suggestion saying that we should have an omnibus law, but we are more concerned about the effectiveness of these provisions. So, Mr. Kwong, your suggestion is not going to be accepted. But we reviewed regularly the laws on the protection of animals. As the Secretary said, if they are outdated and if they are if not in line with international trend, we are prepared to update them. We can update the laws in the light of our modern circumstances. For example, we said we would review the definition of cruelty to animals and the penalties. We did look at the legal provisions in other jurisdictions, and ours have been found to be quite comparable. I don't have sufficient time. I was asking you whether we should have something introduced one by one, or we should have a comprehensive law. Returning to 139B, you should eliminate commercial breeding, and I find it regrettable that you are legalizing the trade under Cap 139B. How many of these operations are in domestic premises, and how many are the puppy mills? Large-scale puppy mills? You mean of the licenses granted? You mean DBLA vis-a-vis DBLB? There were 6 under DBLA. for the domestic operations. Have you visited these places? We don't like the legalization of domestic breeding of dogs, which is legal. Are they big, with back gardens? Some does. Some do have this. What did you talk to them in the processing of the applications? Well, we would look at the documents, we look at the environment, and we also refer to the gross floor area. As if there's no gross floor area in the lease, we would take measurements of the size of the premises. For small dogs, we require 100 square feet per dog before deciding on the maximum of number of dogs allowed in the premises. What Dr. Sid did tell us that for DBLA, mainly they are for domestic premises. So if your pet has given birth to a few puppies, should trading be allowed for such puppies? According to foreign experience, when it comes to the love and care for these animals, domestic breeders have been doing better than large-scale breeders. So have you ascertained, can you confirm that these DBLA operators are doing better than those under DBLB? Well, the number of animals covered by a DBLA license is just 1 to 3. We sincerely believe that they are keeping the breeding animals as pets. And some of the applications may not be in line with our requirement, and as a result, they withdrew those applications, and we also rejected one. Sorry, it's my time. Sorry. So how many applied and how many were rejected? For DBLA, in three applications, the applicant withdrew the applications of their own accord, and we rejected one application.
甲類嗰啲係罰籠養咧，定係 free 自動啊？
Is DBLA? Well, no cage is allowed for DBLA unless the animal has to be put on a quarantine because of sickness. Mr. Roy Korn, I think there's some misunderstanding. This light is on all the time. Can I press it? Have it deactivated? Well, they know that Ms. Mo is an eager speaker, so they don't want to switch it on and off so frequently. So please switch on my mic. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your concern of the proposal to have a law on animal protection. I'm very worried by the official's response earlier. A motion sponsored by me was carried. It was a motion about reforming the animal welfare laws and the proposal to enact a law on animal protection. So the idea is to be more proactive in afford protection to animals. And the Bureau is saying that the penalty levels are comparable when we compare ourselves with foreign jurisdictions. Well, Hong Kong people are proud of our concern and interest in protecting animal welfare. But when it comes to the gathering of evidence and law enforcement, there are people constantly challenging our laws. They think they can just escape without any penalty.
So in the end, nothing was done about it. The whole issue boils down to the fact that we don't have a comprehensive set of legislation regulating this. So in terms of setting up a dedicated task force and so on, well, can we update the legislation further? Because the maximum fine is $200,000 and an imprisonment term of 3 years. That's the maximum penalty. But then you said that we compare favorably to overseas jurisdictions when it comes to legislation. But then, as Ms. Claudia Mo just said, so is it possible that we can introduce these laws one by one? So we'll deal with the most pressing issues first. You haven't really closed the door on setting up a dedicated police team on animal welfare. So can we have animal police, so to speak? Well, I'd like to clarify this with Mr. Kwong first. What I'd like to say is, well, earlier on I was saying that we've been reviewing issues and legislation concerning animal welfare, and I was just giving this as an example. And as I said at the beginning, the administration has been reviewing this from time to time. That is about legislation on animal welfare. Is it outdated already? Have we been able to catch up with the latest trends? And would be more than happy to update them if we are found to be lagging behind. So it's not that we are not going to do anything about it at all. But then with regard to the definition on cruelty to animals and also the penalty, just a few months ago, we discussed that at this subcommittee, and we had reviewed that, and that's the observation that we had then. Well, on animal police, I think there was a discussion at the subcommittee too, and the police consideration was about how they can conduct investigations to go after these cases involving cruelty to animals and so on. And the police already explained on previous occasions that given their existing manpower, and actually at different police divisions and police stations, they've already got manpower to do that. But then they do not yet have the manpower to set up dedicated teams. So I'd like to clarify that it's not true to say that they have dedicated teams in individual districts. It depends on the district commander. All right, in Yuen Long and in Wong Kok, they might have such teams. And we cannot just be complacent thinking that they've already got dedicated teams for animal welfare and so on. But then what if there is cruelty to animals, if they are beaten up and so on? Do you think the situation is satisfactory, and therefore there is no need for you to conduct any immediate review? So is it that the situation is satisfactory and therefore there is no need for you to conduct a review immediately? Yes, Dr. Wong? Well, Mr. Wong, I think the discussion is about the existing legislation and how do we compare with international standards. I think we compare pretty favorably with international situation, and we've been following up on each and every case involving cruelty to animals. I think that has been widely reported in the media too, and the AFCD has been working very hard. If we need any professional advice from the AFCD by the police, then the AFCD would be more than willing to help, and in most of these cases the AFCD would be more than willing to help. But then in terms of actual enforcement and also successful prosecution cases, we do have some successful cases. So I do not see that because of the incomplete legislation, the police have not been able to enforce the law, and therefore they might not have been able to protect the welfare of the animals. Well, is it that the administration is happy with the current situation? It's a simple question. All you need to say is yes or no. So I'd just like to know whether or not you're of the view that the current legislation is complete or is comprehensive. All right, this is the purview of the Security Bureau because it involves the police, and last time the Security Bureau also had to send representatives to come to our meeting, and they also told us that they did have dedicated teams in individual districts, but then they would not be designating that certain officers would be called animal police and so on. So if you want to follow up on this further, maybe you can resort to other avenues, or we can also refer it to the panel to look into this. Yes, Lau Kwok Fun. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, when it comes to animal police, we've been fighting for that for many years, and before we are able to do so, there are different pieces of legislation which are highly inadequate in protecting animals. So I think the least that you could have done is to increase the penalty so as to increase the deterrent effect, because from what we have seen recently, there have been cases of abusive behavior on animals. For example, even tortoise has been the subject of abuse. So can I first turn to the legislation? So is it that the coverage has not been comprehensive enough? So can you do something about it? Well, I'd like to remind members, well, we're discussing CAP 139B. Anyway, it's okay for you to raise these questions. So administration, your response, please. Yes. Thank you for your question, Mr. Lau. Well, some members have asked similar questions just now, and as we have said, we've been reviewing the existing legislation from time to time to make sure that Hong Kong's legislation is able to protect animal well-being. And in fact, in the policy address and in the policy agenda, we also said that we would be reviewing Hong Kong's animal welfare legislation, and we will also be introducing the concept of duty of care. As to law enforcement against cruelty to animals, concerning the substance of the law, yes, we can always update it so that we'll be able to change with time. But then, as we have said, we have made some comparison, trying to compare ourselves with overseas legislation, and also in terms of penalty and also definition. I think we are comparing rather favorably with our counterparts overseas. We are not lagging behind, but then in most cases, well, Hong Kong's penalty has been on the low side, and basically there has been no deterrent effect whatsoever. So I'll be asking you for some statistics later, because I understand that this is an item on something else, but then I'd just like to bring up the issue anyway. So can you give me the figures later? Okay, we can then move on later. Next, as there is no other member who would like to ask questions on this subject, let's move on. Okay, we can now move on to another item, item 3, observation of dogs and cats on public health grounds. Well, we have received a letter from Honorable Lau Kwok Fun. It's about 2 cats who have been under observation as a result of reports being received, and he'd like to express his concerns, and because of extensive public concerns on the 2 cases, you've taken it up with the administration, and we believe that we can include that on our agenda today. And the administration would also like to tell us more about observation of animals on health grounds. So can we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes, because some members have to cast their votes at the development panel meeting. Thank you. So meeting will be adjourned for 5 minutes.